3 years ago, when I was 19, my older brother Luke had just graduated from college in California. He had spent 4 years out there, accumulating all sorts of things: furniture, electronics, books, everything you'd expect someone to gather after living in a place for that long. Flying back with all of that was out of the question, so the logical solution was a road trip. The plan was simple. We would drive across the country back to New Jersey, where we grew up. For me, it was more than just a way to get Luke's things home. It felt like a summer vacation. I had never done a cross-country trip before, so I was eager to take the scenic route and explore parts of the country I had never seen. Luke, ever the scholar, wanted to take the scenic route too, so we decided to drive through areas like Zion National Park and the Grand Canyon. We could have easily taken a more direct route through Nevada and Colorado, but the idea of seeing more of the country we had both studied about was appealing. To save money, Luke rented a U-Haul instead of shipping his things or starting fresh when we got home. The U-Haul wasn't huge, but it was large enough that we felt like we were driving a moving truck. Before we set off, both our parents and every travel forum we read gave us one very clear piece of advice: be careful in New Mexico. There had been reports of scams targeting travelers, especially in smaller towns or more remote desert areas. Our dad had warned us not to stop in New Mexico unless we absolutely had to. If we did, we were supposed to stick to major gas stations and get back on the highway quickly. So we agreed. We would fill up in Arizona, drive through New Mexico as fast as possible, and stop again once we reached Texas. It seemed like a foolproof plan. The first part of the trip went perfectly. Zion was breathtaking, and the Grand Canyon was everything I had hoped it would be. Arizona turned out to be unexpectedly beautiful too, with stunning desert landscapes and wide open spaces that I'd never expected to find so captivating. But once we reached the more remote parts of New Mexico, things began to unravel. The U-Haul, for whatever reason, was getting far worse gas mileage than we had anticipated. The gas gauge was dropping faster than we had calculated, and before we knew it, we were in a tough spot. Looking for the nearest gas station, we found out that there wasn't one for about 40 miles according to our GPS. But the gauge was already under a quarter tank, and I could tell that Luke was starting to worry. We needed gas, and we needed it soon. There was a small town 10 miles ahead that showed a gas station on the GPS, and though it wasn't ideal, we decided to risk it. The town wasn't large, only a few hundred people, and it had that eerie stillness that some small desert towns have. There were a few dilapidated buildings, a small main street, and not much else. It felt off somehow, especially because we didn't see any other cars passing through. It was as if we were the only ones in the area. When we pulled into the gas station, I started to feel uneasy. There was a guy standing by the convenience store smoking a cigarette, and he kept staring at us. The looks weren't overtly threatening, but they made me uncomfortable. We were obviously not from around there, and the fact that we were driving a U-Haul with California plates only made us stand out more. Despite the odd feeling in my stomach, nothing happened, and we got our gas. But as we tried to leave, things started to get even stranger. We couldn't find the way back to the highway. It should have been simple. We could see the highway from certain intersections in the town, but every road we took seemed to lead us further away from it. It felt as though the town itself was designed to keep us from getting to the highway. No matter which direction we tried, we just ended up going in circles. We tried using the GPS, but the map was outdated, routing us to roads that didn't exist or couldn't be accessed. To make matters worse, we had no cell signal, and the few moments we did have a connection, it was spotty at best. We were driving in circles for over 20 minutes, and the frustration and anxiety were starting to mount. Luke was getting more and more irritated, and I could feel my anxiety rising too. It was beginning to feel unnatural, as if there was something about the town that didn't want us to leave. The road signs didn't match anything on the GPS, and every direction seemed to be taking us further from our goal. Luke decided to go back to the gas station and ask for directions, though I begged him not to. I had a bad feeling, a nagging sensation in the back of my mind that something wasn't right, but Luke insisted. After a few minutes, he came back to the van with a worried expression. The clerk had given him directions, but they didn't make sense. The directions involved driving 17 miles in the wrong direction through desert back roads before looping back to an on-ramp. It sounded completely absurd. We could see the highway from where we were, so why would we drive so far away from it? Luke had asked the clerk a few questions about the route, and the guy had seemed strangely insistent that it was the only way. Luke also mentioned that the clerk had asked a lot of personal questions about where we were going and how long we had been on the road. Luke was no fool. He didn't trust it for a second. He decided then and there that we needed to leave. But just as we were trying to figure out what to do next, a dusty pickup truck pulled up beside us. My heart skipped a beat. I could tell Luke was on edge, ready to speed off at a moment's notice if things took a turn for the worse. The man in the truck asked if we were lost or had broken down. Luke paused, obviously weighing whether or not to trust him. I could feel my chest tightening, wondering if this would be the moment things would go terribly wrong. After a few tense moments, Luke finally told him we were heading for the highway and mentioned the directions we had gotten from the clerk. When the man heard this, his tone changed dramatically. He got serious and told us that we were crazy for even considering that route. The directions would lead us to a desolate area known to be a hotspot for drug runners, he explained. He then gave us new directions, telling us that we were lucky we hadn't been robbed already, considering how out of place we looked driving a U-Haul. With that, he drove off before we could even say thank you. We followed the man's directions, and sure enough, about a mile outside of town, there was a gravel road leading us to the highway. It wasn't the most intuitive route, but after a while, we finally made it back on track. Luke and I didn't say much after that, but we both knew that what had just happened was far from ordinary. It was one of the most unsettling experiences I've ever had. And while we laugh about it now, the feeling of dread and confusion still lingers in my memory. That day in New Mexico taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the feeling of being lost isn't just about direction. It's about the feeling of being trapped in a place that doesn't want you to leave. It was an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone, and one that I hope I never have to relive.